Welcome back to another Coding with Mitch video. In this video, we are going to talk about the interview process at big tech companies. I'll be talking about the interviewing process in detail, including Square's interviewing process. I'm an Android engineer and I work at Square. So if you're looking to apply for a job, you've never applied for a job, this is your first time you're thinking about applying for a job, or maybe you're already in the industry, you've been at your job for a long time and you're unsure of what's out there, what the interview process is like these days. This video is going to be very helpful to you. Also, as a caveat, this video contains my ideas, my opinions, my interpretation of what Square's interview process is like. This is not affiliated with Square in any way. They didn't tell me to make this video. They didn't tell me what to say in this video. Nothing to do with Square. These are my ideas, my opinions, my thoughts. Nothing to do with Square. Just wanted to clarify that. I just work there. Now, I wanted to add some kind of structure to this video so I can add timestamps and it's easy to follow. So it's going to be broken up into 4 main sections. The first section is going to be the interview structure. There's going to be a technical portion of every interview, a behavioral portion, and a system design / past experience portion of the interview. The next section of this video will be high-level positions. So how does the interview change as you apply for higher level positions? Like, are you applying for an intern job, a senior role, a principal engineer role, or even higher? How does the interview process change as you apply for higher roles? In the next section, I will talk about interviewing at Square specifically. So all of the things I talk about in the technical, behavioral, or past experience sections, those are all going to apply to what it's like to apply at Square or go through the interview process at Square. But I'm going to really hone in specifically on what it's like to go through the whole process at Square, from searching for a job on their website, applying to their job, talking to the recruiter, getting your take-home project, or doing your technical portion of the interview, the on-site interview, everything. I'm going to talk about it in detail so you'll get a full picture of what it's like to interview at Square. And I think it'll be really helpful to those who have never done an interview or are thinking of getting back into the interview pool. The last section here is called experience. This is a section that I added as a kind of a bonus section, because sometimes I get the question of like, how much Android experience do you need to apply for like an intern role, for example? Just to give you kind of a look into the future of what I'm going to be talking about in the video, there was a guy on my team at Square who had 0 Android experience. So he had Kotlin and Java experience, but 0 Android experience. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. All right, so let's dive into the first section. The first section is the interview structure. What does this thing look like? When you apply for a software engineering job, generally the interview structure doesn't change. There's going to be a technical portion, behavioral portion, and a past experience or a system design portion. Where it does differ is with respect to whether you do a take-home technical project or a data structure and algorithm style project. Some only do data structure and algorithm questions. Some only do take-home projects, although that's rare. Some give you a choice to either do a take-home or a data structure algorithm question. At Square, that's what they do. You can either choose a data structure and algorithm, or you can do a take-home project. So that's kind of the biggest variance. Also, there's another big variance in terms of difficulty. So obviously, if you've done any data structure and algorithm questions, you know that the difficulty can vary wildly. You can do something as simple as like string manipulation, or you can do something as difficult as design some complicated system with a bunch of unknown gotchas and trick questions, and it's just like an absolute nightmare. If you've done any coding practice on like LeetCode or anything like that, you know there's a big difference from easy to very hard. So yeah, the biggest thing is here, there's a lot of variance. It can depend on who's doing the interview, how difficult did they make the question, the company, maybe their policy, like how difficult the question has to be. The biggest thing I think that I would want to talk about with respect to this variance, like data structure, algorithm, take-home project, and difficulty, is if you can get any insight as to what type of question you're going to be asked before you go into the interview, that's going to be extremely valuable to you. Like, are you going to be doing a take-home project? Are you going to be doing a data structure and algorithm question? If you're doing a data structure and algorithm question, how difficult is it going to be? Is it going to be string manipulation, which it probably won't be, especially if you're applying to a big tech company, or is it going to be something really, really difficult? So you know how much you need to prepare before going into it. So when we talk about the technical portion, which we're about to right now, I'll also give you some insights of like what things that you could do to try and figure out what type of project you're going to be doing, or what type of question you're going to be doing, or how difficult the question might be. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the technical portion of the interview. No matter what, if you're applying for a software engineer job, there's going to be a technical portion of the interview. At least that's as far as I know. I've never heard of a company not doing a technical question, whether you're applying for intern, intermediate, senior, or higher. There's always going to be some kind of technical question, and it's for a good reason, which I'll talk about later. So now, what are some tips that I can give you to help you prepare for the technical portion? As I said earlier, the first thing I think that you want to do is you want to figure out what type of question you're going to be asked. Are you going to be given a take-home project, or are you going to be given a data structure and algorithm project, or a question, sorry. So at Square, for example, they give you a choice. You can do a take-home project, or you can do a data structure and algorithm question. So if you're applying for an Android job, which I'm an Android engineer, so that's what they did, they say, hey, go and build this app with these sort of feature details. That's the take-home project. And then data structure and algorithm is a pretty standard. I don't think I need to explain that. So what can you do to figure out what type of thing the company is going to do? I think this is pretty straightforward these days. You can hop on Twitter. If you know somebody who works at the company, reach out to them, say, hey, do you do a take-home project? Do you do a data structure and algorithm type question? If you know somebody who works at the company, reach out to them and just try and figure out what type of interview question you're going to be doing. It's going to be very valuable for you to know that. Now, if you don't know somebody at the company, you don't know somebody on Twitter who works at the company, you don't have some sort of contact, when you actually do the application, chances are the first screening that the recruiter does with you, they're going to reach out to you and say, and get a feel for you and figure out, ask you about your resume and things like that. At that screening, you can ask them, am I going to be doing a take-home project, or is a take-home project an option, or am I going to be doing a data structure and algorithm style question? If they say, data structure and algorithm style question, personally, if it was me, I would schedule my interview or the question, whenever I have to do that, to as late as possible, so that I can go and grind LeetCode questions for a month to prepare for it. Sadly, that is probably the best way to do it. These algorithm questions you don't know how difficult they're going to be, so you probably want to over prepare, if anything. So now, what are some of the things that you can do to try and figure out how difficult this coding problem is going to be? If it's a take-home project, I think if you have experience in the field, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Like if it's an Android take-home project and you've spent any amount of time on Android, you can probably bet it's just going to be classic Android things that they're going to ask you about. But if it's a data structure and algorithm question, you really don't know. It could be string manipulation. It could be something insanely difficult, like a very hard LeetCode question. You really don't know. So trying to get some insight for how difficult that question is going to be very valuable to you. And I'll give you a personal example. So when I applied for a job, I applied at Square and I applied at a bank. I applied to two places only. I applied at Square for probably all the same reasons that you would apply at Square. There's famous people that work there. I had chats with people who work at the company. They said it's a great company. Salary is good. Benefits are good. Work-life balance is good. Pretty standard, good workplace things. I applied at the bank as my other option because I knew somebody that worked there, and they said that, yeah, this is a pretty decent place to work. So when you apply, if you happen to know somebody at the company, that's the most obvious way to try and figure out, how difficult is this algorithm question going to be? For example, when I applied at the bank, in my screening, I talked to one of the engineers that worked there, the guy who would be conducting the interview. And I said, so what kind of technical question are you going to ask? And he said, it's probably going to be something like string manipulation. So obviously, if you're applying at Google, Amazon, Square, wherever, you're not going to be doing string manipulation. So it's going to vary wildly in terms of difficulty. So if you can ask somebody who works at the company, ask the recruiter, although they probably wouldn't know, just ask somebody, how difficult is this question going to be? How prepared? How many LeetCode questions do I got to do? That's really what it comes down to. All right, now let's talk about the behavioral portion of the interview. So in a behavioral portion of an interview, in general, what they're trying to figure out is, number one, are you a pleasant person to be around? Do they think you would make a good coworker? That's like the main thing, I think. Like if I'm doing a behavioral interview, that's what I'm mostly looking for. I'm thinking, would this person be nice to work with, or would they drive me crazy? Some of the types of questions they might ask might be like, describe when you've encountered a difficult problem. How did you come to a like common solution on your team? And they want you to be specific here. Like, what are the things that you did to come to that common solution? How did you debug it? How did you solve the problem, basically? Other things are based on communication, like how do you communicate with non-engineering types, like customer service people, project managers, designers. How do you effectively communicate engineering things to non-engineering people? That's one of the key questions that they're going to ask. Also customer service people, like I said. So how do you help customer service people accurately describe a engineering problem and help them to communicate with customers effectively? Also communicating workarounds. So like, hey, there's a bug. We're working on this bug. Currently, there's this workaround. So tell people who call in to use this workaround, and the fix will be out whenever. Generally speaking, it's stuff around how you communicate. Are you a nice person to be around? How can you work on a team effectively? That's generally the behavioral question. So like being empathetic and just talking about examples of when you've effectively worked in a team environment, that's the stuff that's going to get you the passing grade. Next, we are going to talk about system design and or architecture / past experience. There's like different names for this section. So there's two kind of things that companies will typically do when you do the system design portion of the interview. They'll either ask you to explain an app or a feature or something that you had a large role in contributing to, or you were the only one who was building it, and explain it in detail. The second one will be like they propose something to you, like they say, hey, you need to build this app. It needs to have these features and do these things. How would you build it? And the key stuff here that you want to emphasize is the whys and the hows. Think of this interview as a technical interview, but there's no code. So you want to like reference the libraries you've used, the caching strategies you've used, all of that really detailed design stuff that maybe there was choices involved. How did you unit test it? How did you UI test it? All of those really specific technical details. So I got a couple examples here that I wrote out. So, say you built some app and it needed to like get data from a server, cache it, and, refresh the data every 5 seconds or something like that. Pretty common Android thing. So you would say to the interviewer, okay, I built this thing. Here's a piece of it that you might find interesting. And you would say, I needed to refresh a list of data every 5 seconds with new data from the server. I did a request on a background thread using coroutines, and I used Work Manager to schedule that job to run every 5 seconds. The data is inserted into an SQLite cache and then displayed in a list. If the request fails, I built, X mechanism to handle that and retry the request. I prevented duplicate jobs from running by doing, this other mechanism. So, and then you could talk about, how you unit tested it, how you unit tested the caching layer, the network layer, the view model, if you're using a view model, like whatever, just being as detailed as possible. And probably the interviewer will poke into the things that you're talking about, and they'll ask you questions about it. And then you just elaborate and talk about it. But as detailed as possible, this is the key point. So I got another example here. This is if they were to ask you to design a system as opposed to describing a system that you had built. So they might ask you would, suppose you build an app and it gets data from an API every 5 seconds. You want to cache that data and display it in a list. It needs to work offline. It also displays images. Those images need to be cached. Also, you need to add unit tests. So how would you unit test this? And they might also ask other details like if you're using the SQLite library for Android, how would you unit test that? So like that, I think that would be a pretty like common Android problem to ask in a system design interview. They would, all of those kind of key points, and you would talk about the architecture, your caching choices, your network choices, how you would unit test the different layers. And then they might ask some questions that have sort of hidden questions in them, like that last thing that I mentioned. If you are using SQLite Android library for Android, how would you unit test that? So there's a hidden question within that question, because you can't unit test something that depends on the Android framework. So they would want you to say like, oh, you can't unit test something that depends on the Android framework. So you would need to, build a fake or use RoboElectric or, something like that. So yeah, I think those are two pretty standard examples of questions, or where you would provide information or answer a question that they asked. Something else that I wanted to talk about the technical, behavioral, and system design questions is it's not, I don't know if this is going to be super valuable, but let me know in the comments below if this has been your experience, if you've done interviews or you've been at a company, you've seen this same thing. I think the behavioral and the system design portions of the interview are very easy to fake. Like they're very easy to bullshit your way through it. Like for example, I've done a technical interview. This has only happened to me maybe once, maybe twice when I've been doing interviews, where I did the technical interview and this guy failed miserably. Like he barely knew how to code, it seemed to me, and his ego was out of control, and it was just terrible. It was a terrible technical interview. And then once you submit your review, you can see what the other people reviewed in the other interview section. So like what they put in behavioral, what they put in system design, and the guy almost got perfect scores in behavioral and system design. So I think that those two sections are very easy to BS your way through if you can, talk the talk. Because if you know the buzzwords and you know the libraries and you know like generally how things, the buzzwords, basically, if you know the buzzwords, then I think you can do a really good job of BSing your way through that. But the technical, you can't. You're on video, you're solving a problem. There's no way you can get through that if you don't know what you're doing. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had this experience. I just wanted to mention it. Now we're going to talk about high level positions. So applying for higher level positions and how the interview changes. Typically this is like senior plus, so senior, principal, or even higher roles. So I'm not at one of these high roles, so of course I can't speak from experience, but just what I've gathered from talking to people who are at these high roles, it seems like as you apply for more senior roles or even get promoted to these more senior roles, the things that you really need to demonstrate is like, obviously you got to be technically capable, that's like a given, but you need to demonstrate like company-wide impact. So like how you can leverage your knowledge and spread it out throughout the company to help other people save time. Yeah, it's basically like how do you scale your knowledge to empower other engineers, not necessarily even lower level engineers, but like even the same level or higher. Basically just like how you can scale the work experience and efficiency of like everybody else that's working or your team or whatever. So I wrote a little example here. So I could say like if I was applying for a senior role, I might be doing things like this. I might be like, oh, I built out an analytics infrastructure and fed the data into a dashboard that other engineers could access. The data provided us insights on how our app is performing. It shows things like the crash rate based on the device. It links to Jira tickets to crashes that we're seeing. It lists the most common crashes, things like that. It's like you're empowering other employees to, you're saving them time, because otherwise if they had to like go and find that data, like, and then that would teach only that one person how to find that data. And then say some other person in the future needed to find that data, they would need to go through the same process to find it, as opposed to just, okay, I did this, I built the analytics, I built the dashboard, I just sent out the link to the dashboard and now everybody has that. You're saving like, many engineering hours, or many hours that people will be spending figuring those things out. Another example I have here is, say you led a feature and that feature design, involved 10 other engineers and you wrote the design and you were the leader of the design. Suppose you added some analytics to the feature and you built out a dashboard to track the rollout of the feature and the crashes that were associated with the rollout with the feature. And then you were to say, oh yeah, after we rolled out the feature, the app showed like a 20% growth. And because we have these analytics that we built into the feature, we can see like, oh, we had only one bug, it caused only a few crashes, and everything else was great. So a big part, I think, of like getting hired at the higher roles, or even getting promoted to the higher roles, is being able to prove what you did. So things like analytics become super important, and building like little dashboards that summarize those analytics. Those are like, you need those. Next section. In this section, we are going to be talking about interviewing at Square. I'm going to be talking about what I did specifically to prepare, and I will talk about Square's interview process in detail. So Square's interview process is pretty much like the process that I just described. There's a technical, a behavioral, and a system design portion. But I'll get into some more detail. I want to give you a step-by-step process starting from, okay, I want to apply for a job. Like, where do I find the job? How do I apply? All the way down through like doing the take home project, talking to the recruiter, getting an offer. I'll go through the whole process. And the main reason I'm doing this is actually for selfish reasons. I know that after I make this video, many of you are going to DM me and ask me about the Square interview process. There's already a lot of people that DM me, and I give the same answer every time. And I don't give away any information, by the way, anybody who's watching this at Square. I just give public information, or what the recruiter would tell them anyway. I'm basically just saving myself time. So don't DM me, watch this video. So first, what did I do to prepare for my interview at Square? I actually didn't do very much, and I'm not saying that to brag and say, oh, I didn't need to study. It was so easy and blah, 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 blah. It's not what I mean. Basically, what I've been doing, like my courses that I build, the stuff that I work on, that very adequately prepared me for the interview. Hint, hint. But also, I think that anybody who has spent like any reasonable amount of time on Android would be well prepared for the Android take-home project, because it's not going to be like some random thing. They're not going to ask you to do some random thing that you've never done before. It's going to be like a classic Android thing, and they have some Android specific gotchas in the project. It's just standard Android stuff. If you spent a reasonable amount of time on Android, you should have no problem with the take-home project. And again, no, I can't give details about the take-home project, so don't DM me. Go and apply at Square and find out for yourself. So if you don't decide to do the take-home project and you opt for the data structure and algorithm option, I don't think there's any surprises here. It's just a standard data structure and algorithm question. To practice this, you're gonna have to go grind lead code questions and practice. That's really the only way to do this. Honestly, if I was applying and I knew that I was gonna go with the data structure and algorithm option, I would probably put aside like 3 months of time to really prepare and be able to do like the very hard questions, because you never know what you're going to get. There's a big variance between interviewer to interviewer. Some people actually design their own questions, so you really don't know what they're going to ask you. So all you can do to prepare is just practice, practice, practice. I guess one other tip that I would give you, if you're choosing between Kotlin or Java, by the way, you can choose any programming language you want. Even if you're applying for an Android role, I believe you can still use like Python or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. I think that's kind of weird, but whatever. I guess it's just a engineering question in general. But yeah, one tip I would say, if you're choosing between Java and Kotlin, don't use Java. Java just takes too long. It's too verbose. I've watched interviews and they often run out of time if they use Java. Kotlin is much faster. There's lots of great utility functions, especially for manipulating lists. You'll save yourself a ton of time. All right, so now let's actually talk about the steps that you need to take to go and apply for a job at Square. The first step is go to careers.squareup.com and go to search jobs. Once you fill this out, so you would go to, you can select all of these even. Like if you don't care where you work, if you want to go to Block, Afterpay, Cash App, Square, like whatever, doesn't matter, select them all. They're all going to be great jobs probably. Scroll down to software engineering and go to full-time or whatever you're looking for, full-time or intern or part-time. And I'm a fan of remote. Also, all of the jobs at Square are remote. You're allowed to be remote, at least as far as I know. Every single software engineering role is allowed to be remote, maybe even every role. I'm not exactly sure, but probably I'm going to say definitely 95% of jobs are remote available. And also another thing that you should know about that is you don't even necessarily have to be in the same city or I think even country to apply for a job, like a remote job posting. I think the only caveat there is the time zones. You're not going to get a job on a team where your time zone is like 10 hours difference. Like for example, my team, some people I'm on the West Coast of Canada. Some people work on the East Coast, West Coast, the middle of the country. Some are in the US, some are in Canada. So I think the general rule is as long as the time zone is within 3 hours, you're probably fine to apply to that's remote role. Okay, so you click remote here, and then you just scroll down and browse. So Android engineer restaurants, hey, that might even be on my team. I work on the restaurants team, so you could apply for that. I'm in the West Coast of Canada. Toronto is on the East Coast, so like I could apply for that job. This one's San Francisco, which is the West Coast of North America. Yeah, you probably want to search on Android, I guess. Also, I guess another thing that I would say is if you're applying for like a intermediate role and you're not really sure if you would be a senior, I think you should apply anyway. Like if you're currently an intermediate at your current job or whatever, and there's a senior posting, I think you should probably still apply for the senior role. I've seen lots of times people apply for jobs, and if they like you in the interview, they'll find a job for you. So just because you're not currently a senior or you're not currently an intermediate, maybe you're an intern, I think you should still apply for the job and just let it play out. See what happens. Go through the interview process. If the recruiter likes you, you did great on the interview, all that stuff, they'll find a position for you. So after you select one of these and you actually go through the interview process, you obviously, submit your application and go through that. And the next thing that will happen is a recruiter. So this is step 2. That was step 1. Step 2 is a recruiter will reach out and just do like a screening with you. Now, I don't know the exact goal of this screening, but I'm going to guess that it's basically just to get a feel for you. The recruiter is going to ask you things about your resume, ask you things about the projects you've worked on. Basically, I think they're trying to get a feel for you. Are the things that you said you did you actually do them? And just kind of get a feel for your character. I think that's the main point of the screening. If you get past that, the recruiter, gives you the check mark, then you would move on to the next part where they offer either a take-home project or a data structure and algorithm question for you to complete. So step 3, if you choose the take-home project, they send it out to you. You get it emailed to you. I think you have about a week to complete it, although they say that it should only take you about 5 hours to do the project. I believe they give you about a week to do it. The data structure and algorithm one, I'm not exactly sure because when I applied, I did the take-home project. Probably the same thing. They probably give you a week and they say, hey, you should spend 2 hours completing this project. Once you're done, you submit it to I think through the recruiter, or they tell you how to submit it, and then that gets reviewed. And then you go on to step 4. So step 4 is if they like your take-home project or you pass the algorithm question, then you get invited for an on-site interview. And on-site doesn't actually mean on-site. I think even if you apply for a non-remote role, I still don't think you actually go in to do the interview. So the on-site interview is a full day. I think it's a 5-hour day. You do 4 1-hour sessions where you are going through the interview process, and I'll talk about those, and you get 1 hour for lunch. So now let's talk more about what the on-site interview looks like. So the first session, the first 1 hour session is a technical session. Second one is a technical session. Third one is behavioral. Fourth one is system design. And these are all 1 hour each. Then you have 1 hour for lunch, as I said. So if you decided to do the take-home project for Square, the 2 technical sessions, you're actually building onto the project that you did in the take-home assignment. So they'll be the interviewers will come in and they'll say, hey, pull up your project. We want to add this feature to your project. And then you'll sit on video and you'll write it up with them. And then in the second technical one, same thing. They'll say, okay, in the last session, you added to it. If you failed, so if you didn't complete it, they'll optionally say, okay, just scrap those changes and go from your initial take-home project, and we're going to build this feature onto it. The next session is the behavioral one. Like I said, we've already gone through about what that's all about. And then the fourth one is system design. If you choose a data structure and algorithm question instead of the take-home, the 2 technical sessions are the only ones that change. In those 2, you'll have different data structure and algorithm questions asked each time, and you just got to solve them on video, pretty standard. Now, once you completed the on-site interview, now all you get to do is wait. I think it takes about, a week or 2 before the recruiter will get back to you, and they'll say either, we're moving on to the next stages, which means we're putting together an offer or something like that. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about here is experience. And this is a question that I've been asked many times through, various platforms. Do you need Android experience to apply for an Android role? And if so, how much experience? So I don't know, but I only know, I can think of one experience that I've had. There was actually one guy on my team at Square who had 0 Android experience. And I didn't even know this. He was working there before me, and I started working there, and we were working together for, several months. And then somewhere along the line, someone said, wow, yeah, this guy, can you believe this guy had no Android experience before he got hired? This blew my mind because Android is so notoriously difficult. There's so many gotchas. So all I'm trying to say here is that yes, these things do exist. You can get jobs without any Android experience. Of course, he had Java and Kotlin experience. And I think the reason why this can happen at big companies is because a lot of the, the like Android or platform specific nuances, a lot of the time they get abstracted away at the company you're working at. So you don't touch the activity, you don't touch the services, you're just like building screens or whatever. So you don't really need to know these nuances. So yeah, I just wanted to say that it does exist. Sometimes you don't need to know Android intimately, although it's definitely in your best interest to know Android intimately. You're of course going to move up the ladder much more quickly, because if you don't know it, you're just going to be playing catch up throughout your career, because there's no way around moving up unless you know the platform that you're working on. So that's going to be it for this video. I know it would have been very helpful to me if somebody would have explained the interview process to me before I applied to a job. And if you are thinking of applying at Square, go to careers.squareup.com. Just like I showed you in the video, fill out the fields and find a role and apply. As far as I know, there's no hiring freezes so far. I know a lot of big tech companies are doing mass layoffs, hiring freezes, all these kinds of things. As far as I know, literally nobody has been laid off at Square yet. Fingers crossed, of course. You don't know what's going to happen. But there is job postings. There's no hiring freeze. So, check them out. Go apply at Square. Now, usually this is the point in the video where I would promote my website, codingwithmitch.com, to learn Android development and showcase my many Android courses on here. But I'm not going to do that in this video, because this was more about preparing for a job and, interviewing at Square. And it's, it doesn't feel right to me. So I'm not going to promote my courses on codingwithmitch.com. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.